Two people walk into the same job interview. One has a master's degree, reads 2 books a month, and can hold his own in any conversation. The other dropped out at 19, has 2 weird hobbies nobody takes seriously, and a side project he built for fun. The second one gets hired. It took longer than he expected to get promoted, but eventually he does, and then he builds something of his own. Here's the uncomfortable question. What does the dropout know that the master's degree doesn't? Because the smart person isn't lazy, they're not unmotivated. In fact, they've probably been working harder than anyone else in the room for years. And yet, the gap isn't closing. If anything, it's growing. That's what this video is actually about. Most people assume intelligence is the foundation of success. Study more, know more, be the sharpest person in the room. But here's the trap nobody warns you about. Intelligence doesn't compound, not on its own. You can spend 10 years becoming world-class at one thing and still lose every single time to someone who's merely good at 2 things that don't usually go together. That's not a motivational line. That's how markets actually work. The programmer who's also a decent writer doesn't just earn more than programmers. She earns more than most writers too, because she lives at an intersection almost nobody else occupies. Rare intersections mean zero competition. That's the first piece of the equation. The second piece is what most people completely miss, and it's the part that makes or breaks everything. But before we get there, we need to talk about why smart people specifically fall into this trap. Smart people get addicted to being right. When you've spent your whole life being the person who knows the answer, your identity starts to live in expertise. Single, deep, siloed expertise. The more you know about one thing, the more uncomfortable it feels to be a beginner at anything else. This is why the brilliant specialist stays stuck, not because they lack knowledge, but because adding a second skill feels like admitting the first one isn't enough. Think of it this way. Your skills aren't files stored in separate folders. They're more like ingredients in a kitchen. Flour alone is just flour, but flour, eggs, and heat, suddenly you have something nobody else in the room can make. That's what skill stacking actually is. Not collecting credentials, not taking courses, deliberately choosing 2 or 3 skills that almost never overlap and becoming credible at all of them. The programmer, writer, the doctor who understands behavioral economics, the marketer who codes. Each one is rare. Each one is nearly impossible to replace. But here's what nobody tells you about skill stacking, and this is where even ambitious people quietly destroy that. Every weekend, another course. Every month, another skill added to the LinkedIn profile. And they're still answering to someone half their age who learned one thing deeply and practiced it obsessively. Because stacking the wrong skills, or stacking them the wrong way, isn't just useless, it's worse than doing nothing. It gives you the feeling of progress, while the gap between you and the people actually getting ahead keeps quietly growing. The missing piece isn't more learning, it's a different kind of learning. Your brain treats information differently depending on how it's used. Passive learning, reading, watching, listening, gets filed like a photo on your phone. It exists, you technically have it, but you'll never retrieve it when it matters. Deliberate practice is different. It's the difference between watching someone swim and actually getting in the water, struggling, adjusting, failing, and doing it again. Your brain only commits something to long-term, usable memory when it's forced to retrieve and apply it under slight discomfort. That friction isn't a sign something's wrong, that friction is the mechanism. This is why the person who knows so much often can't do much with it. Their knowledge is stored, but it was never activated. So here's the actual formula, and the order matters. Don't ask, what should I learn next? That's the question that built the 47 certificate problem. Ask instead, what 2 things practiced together would make me nearly impossible to replace? When you find that intersection and apply deliberate practice to the combination, not each skill in isolation, something changes. You stop competing in crowded lanes and start occupying a space only you can stand in. That space is where leverage lives, and leverage is the actual mechanism behind every overnight success you've ever envied. Here's the part most people won't say out loud. The 2 skills you should combine are rarely the 2 skills you'd choose if you were optimizing for impressiveness. They're usually the skill you're already good at, plus the skill you've been quietly avoiding because it makes you feel exposed. The analyst who's terrified of public speaking, the designer who won't touch numbers, the writer who refuses to sell.
That avoidance isn't random. It's pointing at exactly the intersection where almost nobody is competing because it's uncomfortable to occupy. The most powerful rare combinations in the market aren't built from two strengths. They're built from one strength and one conquered weakness, because that's the combination that almost no one else will do the work to build. Remember the person who got hired over the master's degree? He wasn't smarter, he wasn't more talented. He had built something specific, two skills that almost nobody thought to combine, and practiced that combination until it became second nature. That's the answer to the interview. That's the answer to the gap. Not intelligence, rarity. And rarity doesn't just open doors, it changes what you're allowed to charge, what you're offered without asking, and what your ceiling actually is. The broke and stuck loop isn't an intelligence problem. It never was. It's a rarity problem. And rarity is something you can engineer, one deliberate intersection at a time.